Washington Journal continues.
Joining us now, Tom Fitton. He's the president of Judicial Watch, here to talk about former President Trump, his legal issues. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Remind people about the purpose of Judicial Watch, what it does, and how it's funded.
Well, Judicial Watch is a nonprofit educational foundation funded by contributions, and we sue. We sue under the Freedom of Information Act to gain access to government information so the people know what the government's up to. We represent whistleblowers. We sue the government when it steps outside the line legally. And so when it comes to FOIA litigation, Judicial Watch really is second to none in the United States.
What's the, as far as suing and getting this information, what do you think it gives the people who go to your website? What do you want them to get from that?
The understanding of how the government operates, especially areas that may impact government corruption and misconduct. If the government can't be policed by the people in a republic, then we're doomed.
As far as the legal underpinnings of what you do, you talk about corruption, you talk about legal processes. How does that all apply to, you think, of what's going on in New York about these potential indictments against the former president?
Well, I think this is evidence of government corruption. You're seeing it seeing it almost as it happens. You have Democratic politicians, an elected politician in New York, a left-leaning jurisdiction, seemingly target the president on pretextual, unprecedented legal grounds to try to jail him. He's the putative challenger to President Biden. He's the likely primary challenge. He'll probably win on the primary. And the idea that you would have this, as I said, pretextual, novel, as the New York Times called it, risky legal theory, to try to jail Biden's chief opponent, it's so disturbing, and it undermines the rule of law. It's an attack on, as I say, our Republican form of government, and it seems to me incumbent upon every elected official from the president on down to denounce this.
Well, if the president potentially did something wrong as far as these money payments to Stormy Daniels, shouldn't it be investigated?
It has been investigated, and this is even among the Bragg staff, Alvin Bragg, who's the district attorney in New York. They call it the zombie case, because they've been walking around the office for years and years, and no one thought there was a credible legal claim or legal issue with the president. The feds had looked at it. They were very interested in. They had raised the legal issue initially by causing, or really forcing, Michael Cohen to plead guilty to campaign finance related issues on these payments, but they never pursued it. And now it's years later, 5 years later, and they decided to pursue it less than a few weeks, I guess, was it 5-6 weeks after the president announced he was running for re-election.
You used the word seemingly political targeting. I think, if I got it right, why do you couch it as such?
Oh, no, I shouldn't have couched it as such. It's political targeting. I think, look, there are three Democratic political operations. In New York City, left-leaning Democratic politicians are trying to jail Trump. In Fulton County, Georgia, left-leaning politicians are trying to jail Trump. And here in Washington, D.C., another left-leaning jurisdiction, Democratic politicians are trying to jail Trump. And I tell you, I suspect Putin and Xi in Beijing recognize this type of activity. They're going after the regime's opponents here in D.C. or New York and Georgia, all part of a piece in terms of the Democratic Party anti-Trump apparatus. And, if any other country was targeting the putative political opponent of the president, there'd be no doubt about what's going on here. And here we're supposed to pretend that these folks are acting otherwise, and I don't think many Americans are going to buy it.
Our guest's with us until 8:45, and if you want to ask him questions, 202-748-8000 for Democrats, 202-748-8001 for Republicans, and 202-748-8002 for independents. You can text us at 202 748-8003. We heard Speaker McCarthy call potentially for DA Bragg to come before Congress and testify on these issues. Is that something that should the activity of Congress?
Yeah, there's urgency, it seems to me, to investigate what's happening here. I think the President Trump's civil rights are being violated here. Trump is a federal candidate, the leading candidate for the Republican Party, and you have a local Democratic politician trying to jail him on pretextual grounds. And I think Congress has an interest in making sure that a major presidential candidate and a former president isn't turned into a political prisoner. And I want to know what the Justice Department's role in this has been. Has there been coordination, communications? And what changed over the course of 5 years that they decided to target Trump with this unprecedented application of the law?
It was Senator Rand Paul who put out on his Twitter feed saying a Trump indictment would be a disgusting abuse of power. And then he adds the DA should be put in jail. Does that go too far?
Well, I mean, I think he should be investigated. And I think that investigation, no one should be immune from investigation. And if he's abusing his authority, he should be investigated. Going to jail, I think he was just being cheeky there. But there are federal laws that prohibit people from violating civil rights of folks in situations like this, President Trump. And I think President Trump's a crime victim here. I think this is a corrupt district attorney investigation. It's politicized. And, if I were the governor of New York, I'd be trying to rein it in any way I could under law. The president should be denouncing this directly. And on top of that, all elected politicians in Washington, D.C., here in Congress, they should be expressing some urgent denunciations of this. And I'm not seeing it. And I think Americans should take note of those politicians and political commentators who are supporting this effort to put someone in jail based on their political affiliations, not because of anything they supposedly did wrong. Because, if it's Trump one day, it could be the rest of us another day.
You talked about denunciations. It was the former president early on saying that protests should take place. As far as that, what did you think of that call?
The First Amendment applies to supporters of Donald Trump. The First Amendment applies to those who are critics of Alvin Bragg. And the left would like to pretend that the right has no right to protest, and they pretend that any calls for conservatives to protest is a call to violence. The reality is that the left has regularly used violence to achieve political ends. The January 6th issue was a disturbance that got out of control. It wasn't a planned violent effort like we see regularly going on in cities across America over the last few years. So people have a right to protest, and if they want to, they should exercise it freely and peacefully. But of course, that goes without saying.
Tom Fitton, again, of Judicial Watch, joining us. We have calls lined up for you. Our first one is from Matt. Matt's in Falls Church, Virginia. Democrats line. You're on with our guest. Go ahead with your question or comment.
So I have a quick question and a longer question. My quick question for the guest is, you said you get your funding from contributors. How many of your contributors are Trump donors?
I have no idea.
Well, just take a guess. Give me an estimate in your mind.
I have no idea.
I think that is completely and utterly false. I think you can guess it's probably 100% of your donors. You are a right-wing organization, and most of your donors are extremely rich Trump donors. You can look it up on Open Secrets, and you're probably going to find many of your donors are large Trump donors who would not fund you if you went against Trump.
Okay. What's the second question, Matt?
My second question is, you say this is a political investigation of Donald Trump. Is the investigation of Hunter Biden a political investigation being pushed by Republicans?
That's Matt in Virginia.
It's not a political investigation. There's frankly no real investigation of Hunter Biden. He's been protected for the last several years by the Justice Department and the FBI. I think the test to see whether something is right or wrong or suspicious or not for these types of investigations is that, is the person being targeted with a novel application of the law? Is it the first time the law is being applied in a particular way to the target? And that's happened repeatedly with President Trump. On the other hand, with Hunter Biden, there's kind of plain evidence of racketeering, tax issues, bribery, other things like that. And there's little to no movement, investigatory-wise, by the Justice Department.
You would even put the Weaponization Committee into that mix as well?
Well, I mean, they're investigating the conduct of the Justice Department and the FBI in abusing American citizens. So that seems to be kind of right up the alley as to what Congress needs to be doing. I mean, the big question is, why hasn't a special counsel been appointed for Hunter Biden, especially when you compare and contrast the appointment of Mueller? How is it the president's son can be investigated by the Justice Department outside the special counsel regulations that we were told repeatedly were sacrosanct in terms of maintaining independence of the investigator when it became to Trump, but the rules changed with Biden? And I think, I kind of jokingly say this, Pedro, I don't think there's a double standard. There's a single standard when it comes to the Justice Department's approach on these issues. Protect Democrats, protect friendlies, and target Trump and others they consider to be on the wrong side of the political aisle. And it's consistent, unfortunately, over the last few years. And in my view, it's irredeemably compromised both the Justice Department and the FBI.
Independent line from Mississippi. We'll hear from James. Hello.
Yes, how you all guys? How you guys doing?
Good morning.
Yes, sir, Mr. Tom.
Yes.
Now I'm looking on the screen about your occupation. You saying that the investigation of the president is wrong. Well, you also brought up the Miller case. Now you're supposed to be a professional and be honest, right? Now on the Miller case, Barr and the special counsel were doing an investigation about the very thing we're talking about, and it turns out that Barr and the special counsel was working together to find out information on Hunter Biden, quote, Hunter Biden, the president, but then Barr and the special counsel went overseas together and started dipping and dabbing in these investigations, and they found out that particular country, or wherever they went, had information on President Trump of doing something illegal. And not only that, then you go back to the Miller case. Miller did not say that President Trump was innocent of any crime. He said that he could not cross that line. But it's possible 10 charges, sir. And you guys are skipping and hopping all around the Republican Party. You and all the rest of you guys are going to lose badly in 2024. And not only that, a lot of these senators that you all are on these boards and things, they refuse to be subpoenaed.
Okay, we'll leave it there.
Just to be clear, an investigation that is legitimate and protects the rights of those being investigated isn't necessarily wrong. Here, this is harassment. I mean, and an indictment arising with this novel application of the law. I mean, this issue already, quote, has been investigated, unquote. So there's nothing new under the sun here. And I'm not quite sure what your caller's referencing with Barr, and I think he's referencing Durham. They looked into allegations that popped up while they were investigating the abusive targeting of Trump. Something popped up, I guess, about Trump that raised issues about whether there was misconduct about Trump. And I'm not quite sure how that was resolved. But knowing this Justice Department, if they had a scintilla evidence that Trump had done anything wrong, they would have prosecuted him.
Let me sidebar to the Durham investigation a little bit, because your website recently posted about the cost of John Durham's research, particularly not only the cost, but what did people get from it?
Well, we had to battle them a bit to get these records, and I don't know why it's a state secret what his total expenses were for I think it was the last fiscal year, if I recall. It was $8 million, and I think people will draw their own conclusions as to whether justice has been, we got a fair deal from the Durham investigation, at least 1 year for $8 million. I don't know what the totals over the years are, given the paucity of charges he's brought and the failure of the prosecutions he's brought.
So you're saying it's not a fair deal?
I don't think we've gotten our money's worth.
Let's hear from Republican line in Pennsylvania. William, you're on with Tom Fitton of Judicial Watch. Go ahead, please.
Yes, this case is already over with. Stormy Daniels had to pay Trump's lawyers and Trump for all this, so I don't know why it's still going on. And with all the Rhino Republicans, you're not going to win in 2024 if you keep on disgracing us MAGA people. And one more thing,
Okay, caller, we'll leave it there. I think he was referring to Stormy Daniels' defamation payments to former President Trump.
Well, I get, the caller's raising the issue about the quality of the witnesses being used against Trump. And, my view, Bragg was given information that could result in charges against people like Stormy Daniels for extortion. So instead, he seemingly wants to prosecute the victim of the extortion attempt. And of course, Michael Cohen has been prosecuted and found guilty of perjury. His lawyer reportedly had, or he did not reportedly, his lawyer or former lawyer said he testified to the grand jury saying that Cohen told me, oh, look, this money was about Melania and protecting Melania from being embarrassed or, protecting the family of Trump from having this information come out, which would go belie the allegation that this was done on behalf of the political campaign. And as the 2024, Pedro, I don't know how this is going to work out. I suspect it will probably strengthen Trump's position in the primary. But in a general election, I can't imagine an indictment's helpful to any candidate. I mean, if indictments were helpful to politicians, I think they'd be lined up outside the courthouse asking for one. They're not.
Michael Cohen's a convicted felon now. Do you think that complicates the case that Alvin Bragg has to bring?
I would think so. But if you're in an extremely anti-Trump jurisdiction, you take your bets, and in many ways the process is the punishment. So he gets the indictment, maybe the trial's put off, and Trump has this hanging over his head during the entire campaign. I don't know how it pans out. I mean, I was just thinking this morning. I don't even know how does the Secret Service handle this. Are they going to be with Trump during the arraignment when he's in custody? He'll be in custody for a little period of time during what I would call an arrest. And let's say he's convicted or denied bail. Does the Secret Service sit with him in the jail? This is the height of absurdity that we would kind of try to break the system, as Bragg is suggesting, over these penny ante, dubious allegations, and I say that charitably.
Sam is in Atlanta, Georgia. Democrats line. Go ahead. Good morning.
Like Pedro, Donald Trump called. I want to say this slow for your lying guest there. Donald Trump called.
What am I lying about, sir? What did I lie about?
Please don't interrupt me.
Let him make a statement. Then
please don't interrupt me, sir.
Caller, go ahead, please.
Okay, Donald Trump called for the suspension of the Constitution. There's only one person in America that has called for the arrest of their political enemies, and it wasn't a Democrat. This, Pedro, don't insult us by having these lies come on, just like Fox News. I'm not making this up. Fox News is lies. This is one of the Fox News lies. Do not let the Fox News lies infiltrate this precious show. I don't mind right-wingers because they're Trump supporters. Pedro.
Caller, we've invited the guests we've invited. Do you want to ask him a question before you go?
Yes, and because also, Pedro, we are not stupid.
Well, don't talk to me. Talk to the guests. Do you have a question or comment for our guest, please?
Hey, Pedro, I will, and like I said, I will get off. Okay, Fox. Okay, don't insult us, Pedro. And like I said, just because Fox News viewers are stupid, everybody's not.
Okay, caller, we're going to leave it there. Anything from that you want to respond to?
If you're going to call me a liar, I'm not going to respond to you other than to say, I don't know what you're talking about.
Curtis on our independent line. He's in Baltimore.
Well, thank you very much for having me this morning. And I can understand the last caller's hostility towards your guests. Truly, if anybody belongs in prison, it's Donald Trump. Donald Trump has been a problem for this country before he even became president of the United States of America. You get on this show and you tell us, you try to feed us all of this bull crap about him not being held responsible for his actions. He's committed treason, according to me and a lot of other Americans in this country. So you can take this guest, Pedro, and go on with your show. Thank you.
We will. Do you want to respond to that?
There's simply no evidence that he's done any of that. There's this hostility to Donald Trump, and unfortunately there's this, what I would call this contagion among his opponents, that they just can't deal with him as a political opponent. They have to treat him as someone who they want to jail. And I think, that's how you undermine the country. And frankly, if you're supporting this politicized prosecution, this effort to turn Donald Trump into a political prisoner, it's un-American. And, we've got to be blunt about this. This is not about Donald Trump per se. It's about how our law enforcement system is going to be used. Is it going to be used as a vehicle to put people in jail that you don't like politically, simply because of their politics and, the facts and the law and the evidence aside? And I think that's the standard for Trump. Mueller found there was no American knowingly worked with the Russians to steal the elections. Well, what else do you need? Let's move on and stop trying to jail your political opponents and make the case in the public square about why your guy or gal, whoever is running, should win. And it seems to me the left wants to use this case to rig the election, essentially, by changing the election process, by having law enforcement come in on the side of Joe Biden.
The refrain from the other side will be no one should be above the law. Why shouldn't that apply to the president, at least looking at these matters?
Pedro, no one should also be below the law, in the sense that everyone deserves protection of the law and equal justice. And you can't be targeted because of who you are. It should be what you did. And Trump's being targeted because of who he is. And in the case of this situation in New York, it's Donald Trump, and and you can see it over the course of the various investigations. They're just thinking of ways to try to throw him in jail, and that's not the way it's supposed to work. We were very opposed to, the way Hillary Clinton was treated, and we thought she was given, special treatment. And some of my supporters, some of Judicial Watch supporters said, well, Tom, you keep on saying, you don't necessarily believe Hillary Clinton should go to jail. It's like, no, I think there should be just a legitimate investigation of everything she did. And it doesn't necessarily mean she gets prosecuted, but at least the process is there. Here you've got this process that's been abused and politicized in a way that should be rejected by all men and women of goodwill.
A viewer makes a comment on Twitter. This is Mark Stone saying, didn't the Hillary campaign pay for the infamous Steele dossier and find $100,000 for misreporting payments to a law firm?
Yeah, that's a fair analysis. They tried to disguise monies that were used to target Trump, and that happens. Frankly, many campaigns get caught into mislabeling monies. In this case, it was a dramatic issue because of the nature of what was going on, the lies associated with that mislabeling. It wasn't like they labeled a hotel bill accidentally as a food bill. This was something that was very substantial. And, again, Durham didn't want to do anything about that, at least to date.
Republican line from Peter in New York. Hello.
Hey, good morning. Tom, you and your organization are doing a great job. I apologize for the stupidity of many of the callers on this program. I watch the show repeatedly, and it just turns my stomach. But I have two questions, Tom.
Go ahead.
Number one, Bill Barr Trump's attorney general had the Hunter Biden laptop from December of 2019 and basically did nothing with it. He claims that he came out with a statement saying that it was legitimate, but he really didn't make a big effort to get out there on the Sunday shows and really let the public know that the laptop was legitimate. And also, Tom, I heard a report that possibly the FBI or CIA was using Hunter Biden as a means of monitoring corruption, and that the reason they never reined him in was because they were actually using him. I'd like your comment on that, Tom. Thank you.
I don't know. That's the first time I've heard that second point. I think the criticism of Barr I think it's even worse than what you suggest, in the sense that, I don't think Barr had an obligation to go on Sunday morning talk shows and attack Hunter Biden. It probably would have been inappropriate. But he had an obligation to pursue the leads. And, my understanding was in 2020, to the degree anything was going on in the Hunter Biden investigation, I don't think much was, but he let it be known that nothing should happen. And so that investigation was stalled, not just because from December 2019, for other reasons where they were just sitting on it. And we know separately there's been allegations that folks within the FBI around the time of the election were trying to suppress the investigation of Hunter. But Barr himself didn't want a comprehensive investigation done because he thought it would have been, quote, election interference. But since then, nothing's been done. And we see stories, Pedro, I'm sure you've covered it here on the program. It seems like every 3 months we get these leaks from who knows where. Well, the Justice Department needs to make a tough decision on whether to prosecute Hunter, and nothing gets done. I mean, they're considering lightweight charges, and they're pretending to be agonizing over it. And, how complicated could the issues be related to Hunter, other than he's the president's son, and the president may be implicated in the criminality?
In Maryland, this is Angela, Democrats line. Good morning.
Good morning. I have a Bachelor of Science degree in paralegal studies, and I was listening on the phone. You made an important. You brought up an important word that would be evidence. Now, as I see it, these cases are in the grand jury right now, and they're gathering the evidence. The DOJ is gathering evidence, and you just said earlier there is no evidence. You don't know what the evidence is, sir, and it's really quite offensive the way you denigrate our legal system that I dedicated a career of studying. I find this you haven't seen any evidence. And Trump, yes, he's a former president, but he's a private citizen. And I want all politicians to be held accountable. Biden, Trump, any of them. And so should you. Thank you.
Well, there's a concern that the grand jury isn't actually seeing all the relevant evidence. Mr. Costello, Cohen's former attorney, suggested that there's a lot of material that is exculpatory for President Trump that had been withheld from, or he's concerned that had been withheld from the grand jury. Look, the grand jury sees what Alvin Bragg wants the grand jury to see. Alvin Bragg is an anti-Trump activist. As I said, he's an elected official in New York within a Democratic Party in New York that is virulently anti-Trump. He's a long history of just pursuing President Trump. And I tell you, the leftists can be all excited about trying to jail President Trump, but it's just so harmful to the country, and I just wish they'd step back.
What makes D.A. Trump an activist against the former president?
He targeted, for instance, he targeted when he was in the New York Attorney General's office, he targeted Trump's foundation on, as I said, similarly weak charges of, paying for a painting. I forget what the details were, while ignoring all the allegations against Hillary Clinton and her foundation. And, I just see this, this fanatic pursuit of President Trump within the law enforcement establishment of New York, between Letitia James, who has been pressuring him also. Former attorneys from his office were pressuring him as well. And the idea that a politician isn't making a political decision here, I think, just is a naive analysis.
But aside from the comparisons to Hillary Clinton, are these not legal actions and should be treated as such rather than political moves?
No.
Why not?
Because President Trump is running for president. He's a former president. These are novel applications of the law, and it's up to the district attorney to explain to the public why he's, quote, harassing the president and blowing up the nation in terms of our political system and a presidential campaign. I mean, is the new rule going to be that state attorney generals and district attorneys can now investigate presidents and former presidents and try to jail them on pretextual charges? As I say, novel applications of the law. No one looking at this case can say there's never been anything like it before. And that should give us all pause.
Our guest, Tom Fitton of Judicial Watch. This is from Mary Lou in New Jersey. Independent line.
Good morning, Pedro, and good morning, Mr. Fitton.
Good morning.
Thank you for all the great work you have done with Judicial Watch throughout the years, sir. I am honored to speak with you.
Thank you.
I have a comment, and then I have a question. My comment is, I hear these people call in, and I think they're losing sight of the main issue here. It's not only about Donald Trump. It's about everybody's legal rights to be treated fairly, and they're missing that. Donald Trump is the greatest president in my lifetime, and I'm going to be 75 years old. And unfortunately, Joe Biden, with Barack Hussein Obama right behind him, is the worst. Now, the question I have for you is this. There is a man that works behind the scenes and is one of the main sources of the problem that is going on in this country. His name is George Soros. Now, what I want to know is this man has millions of dollars that he pours into these elections to put these unscrupulous, corrupt DAs in office. What can we do about George Soros, and do you have any idea where he gets all of this money from? Thank you, Mr. Fitton. And
caller, thank you.
I presume he earned it legally. He's a wealthy investor. He's made a lot of money in the financial markets, the currency markets and such. And he has a right as a citizen to participate in the public policy process, just as those who oppose his agenda have a right to, highlight how extremist he is in terms of public policy and the policies of the politicians he's been supporting. And Soros and folks around him, and I would encourage anyone who's interested in these issues to recognize that you don't need to spend a lot of money to have a big impact in some of these local races. I think Bragg raised $2 million total for his campaign.
Direct contributions, according to the Washington Post, yeah.
And Soros, gave $1 million or so to a PAC that spent the bulk of the money on supporting Bragg.
Color of Change PAC, about a billion. I think it got down to $500,000.
Yeah. So, but when even if it's just $500,000. That's a huge percentage of the support for Bragg in his contested primary at that time. So Soros was a key supporter for Bragg, and I think Bragg, as a political official and a public official, should answer for the support he received, given Soros's agenda and his policies. And this is separate and apart from well, maybe it's not, from the Trump issue, because Bragg has been notorious for turning felonies into misdemeanors and taking this kind of soft on crime approach for violent crimes and crimes that really harm the public safety, while throwing the book at Donald Trump, as I said, on pretextual issues.
Karen in our independent line from Minnesota. Hi.
Hello?
Hi, you're on.
Hi, this is Karen from Middleton.
Oh, yep, you're on. Gotcha.
Okay, well, thank you so much for taking my call. And the gentleman who took my call originally, he was very, very polite, and I wanted to add that. My point I had said to him was there was a caller now probably 8 or 10 calls ago that called in and was very rude and asking Tom, how many supporters he had that were Republican and saying that he really knew. And I had said to the man who answered my call, I said, I wouldn't think that politicians should know if their donations were from Republicans, Democrats, or independents. They shouldn't have time and be worried about that. And I compared it to a pastor of a church has no right to know who gives money to the church. He has elders that do it. And I also had told him I wanted to say that people need, I listen to C-SPAN 1 and 2 and 3, but I like to listen to the live and the pre-recorded Senate hearings, and people need to listen to things like that. They don't have to listen to the news. If they would just watch these hearings that happen, they would learn what's really going on. And it's sad that they probably just do the Washington Journal. Of course, I shouldn't be making that there's a word I want to say. But anyways.
Do you have a direct question for our guest? Only because if not, we'll go to another caller. But do you have a question?
I wanted to ask him about the fact that there was the attorney who went in and gave the information to the grand jury about Cohen and what they didn't know. Isn't that correct? And it was like hundreds of pages or something to that effect, that they didn't even know what Cohen had actually said.
Okay, caller, thank you.
Yeah, I guess Costello, is it Robert Costello, suggested that there were hundreds of emails that he thought would be helpful to Trump, and he was concerned the grand jury had seen that. Now, of course, to be fair to Bragg, is that, well, maybe they did see it, and he's not necessarily aware of it from his testimony. And we'll see what happens. Maybe Bragg will walk back, and I would encourage anyone watching to share their views with the governor of New York, Bragg's office. He's a public official. Just call, be respectful, and say what you think about these issues. You have a right to, despite what the left tells us, you have a right to petition your government, and you have a right to protest. And petitioning your government means, calling and sharing your views, and just recognize there are folks just working for a living, taking your call. Be direct and succinct, but I wouldn't underestimate the power of personal interactions with government officials, whether it be in Congress or at the state, local level. It is well. They consider it very carefully.
Democrats line in Tennessee. Robin, hi.
Hey, and also I want to correct him. Alvin Bragg prosecuted Trump's charity for stealing money for kids for cancer and using his charity money to buy a painting. So, when you selectively leave out facts, that's the same thing as lying. So, yeah, you are, sir, a liar. So, are you going to say the same thing about Fonnie Lewis when Georgia comes through? I mean, because at a certain point, we got to admit the fact that Donald Trump is a criminal. He tried to steal the election. And he claimed it was stolen. That was a lie, too. So what's going to be your answer for that?
Mr. Fenton?
Well, people can look at the facts of the targeting of Trump on the foundation and draw their own conclusions. I'm not lying about anything. On the Fulton County case, again, novel application of the law. The president as president was trying to figure out what was going on. The president as candidate was trying to figure out what was going on. The calls he made are public. People should listen to them and draw their own conclusions. And what the left is trying to do, not only in Fulton County, but I think up here in Washington, D.C., through the Garland Justice Department, is criminalize disputing an election and exercising your rights under state, federal, and constitutional law in a way that the left has done repeatedly throughout history.
As far as the look in the documents by the special counsel, where is that as far as the status is concerned?
I don't know. I mean, there's a battle, according to the newspapers, who are trying to read the tea leaves of grand jury proceedings that are typically under seal about attorney-client privileges and whether they apply and can be pierced by Jack Smith, who's the special counsel. So I don't know what's happening there. I mean, I think that's another instance of again, a novel application of the law because it's Trump, while others are protected, or frankly, the law is just made up out of whole cloth in terms of the Justice Department's position.
If I may ask, there was a CNN story back in August that described you as an informal legal advisor to President Trump on this documents case. Is that the case?
Well, I'd be hesitant to call me, quote, a legal advisor, because I'm not a lawyer. Look, I don't talk about what I talk about with Trump or not, but I've been really public about this issue because it's an interesting story, because 10 years ago or so, maybe longer, I hate to admit, we had asked for records. We were taking the position the Justice Department's taken now from the archives. He said, we've got this news out there that Bill Clinton had tapes, recordations made of his communications with foreign leaders and members of Congress. How is that not presidential records? You got to get them. So we sued, and we go into court, and the Justice Department and the National Archives, and the court tells us, you can't do this. No one can second guess the president's designation of presidential records. And the Justice Department lawyers went into the courtroom and told the judge, well, if the president has them after he leaves office, they're presumptively personal. And so when all this erupted last year, I'm like, what's going on here? The Justice Department and Archives did a 180 on their right to get these records. The judge says no one can second guess the president here. And it's new rules for Donald Trump that were not applied to Bill Clinton. And again, figuring out ways to get him, despite what precedent and the law says.
If I may ask, have you had any communications with Jack Smith's team regarding the documents?
Well, there have been reports I was over there.
Right.
But I'm not in a position to talk about what happened when I was over there, but I'm looking forward to talking about it soon.
New Jersey and Republican line, this is Bobby. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi, good morning, Pedro. Good morning, Tom. Tom, I got to come to your defense, my friend. It seems like all the Democrats woke up on the wrong side of the bed today. I am a supporter. I have sent some donations, and I know we need to ask you.
Are you a Trump? I guess I'm supposed to know if you're a Trump contributor or not.
Well, I get the Judicial Watch, emails and things of that nature. So, yes, I'm a Trump supporter, and I'm a Judicial Watch supporter, and I just feel badly, the attacks you're getting today. Here's my questions. Would you agree or disagree that as a Republican, we only have two cable news channels that we can turn to, that being Fox News and Newsmax? Every other channel in this country, CNN, MSNBC, and all the network channels, 2, 4, 7, and 11, and on and on. That's all we have. My next question is, the corruption in this country is beyond belief. You just mentioned it. With the Freedom of Information Act, commonly known as FOIA, you're struggling to get stuff from the Justice Department, the FBI, the CIA. The John Durham thing turned out to be a big disappointment for me. I'm convinced that Chris Wray and some of the people in the FBI are corrupt. And the last question is, are you making any progress with the Hunter Biden laptop investigation?
Caller, thank you. We'll have to leave it there only because matters of time.
Well, getting information on anything related to Hunter Biden is like, drawing blood from a stone from this administration, mostly because they've got supposedly an investigation going on so they can hide documents. But that highlights something else. I mean, there was a big disclosure by Congress last week about money that was evidently passed through a Hunter-friendly business to members of the Biden family from a Chinese Communist front company. And the lack of media interest in that story is astonishing. It's frankly astonishing. And this is on top of Biden's issues related to Ukraine and Russia. Money's going into Hunter's coffers, and then Hunter, as evidenced by his laptop, suggesting that money he was taking care of Joe with. And then you've got this testimony and evidence by Tony Bobolinsky, a business partner, who was confirmed that Joe Biden was in on all of this, or much of it, certainly in the post-vice presidency, that the period between when he was vice president and when he became president. So there's a lot there to be investigated. And you know, does it mean that Joe Biden is, quote, guilty? I don't know. But am I confident the Justice Department is kind of ferreting, trying to figure out what went on? No.
Let's hear from Fairfax, Virginia. Ken, Democrats line. Good morning.
Good morning. Just have a quick question. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
I just have a quick question as far as Trump, and I want to kind of get your opinion. I'm not sure if you answered the previous couple of callers before about what you think about Georgia, because it's a big thing. While you say that, okay, New York is, you know, it's a misdemeanor, it shouldn't be, the leftists are doing this, you literally have Trump on tape trying to find votes. I don't know how you dispute that. So in your opinion, I want to know your opinion. Don't give me the political opinion, the corporate opinion. What do you think? Right is right, wrong is wrong. What's your opinion on what he did? Because you're making it seem like he's just clean. He doesn't do anything. All these things are made up. This is not made up. These are things that he's done. But on this one particular thing from Georgia where you have him on tape, what is your opinion on that? Thank you.
Yeah, I think I described the tape as something that was completely innocent. They were talking about an issue of the number of votes at issue. He wasn't directing anyone to find votes in government. He was talking about the votes they, quote, needed or that were in dispute. And again, I just tell, you say the tape shows what it shows. I say it shows completely appropriate, innocent conduct that should never have been the subject of any investigation. And in this case, Democrats angry at Trump for disputing an election that was exceedingly close in Georgia. And, in my view, this type of activity by the Fulton County prosecutor, what's going on in the Justice Department where they're investigating the appointment of alternative electors, investigating state legislators and poor citizens who were, just doing what they thought they could do to participate in the process with the electoral debate. It's a signal. Come 2024, if it's another close race, if it's another disputed election, it's a warning. They will come after you. So don't exercise your First Amendment rights. These are dangerous times for our republic.
The website for Judicial Watch is judicialwatch.org. Tom Fitton serves as the president. And thank you for joining us today.
Hey, you're welcome, Pedro. Thank you for having me.
Another perspective is coming up next from former federal prosecutor James Zirin. He'll discuss the case stemming out of New York concerning former President Trump, and that conversation coming up on Washington Journal.